Hey HTDA and welcome back to Satisfactory. If you're wondering what you're looking at, then you probably missed the previous episode, so it's not necessary to look at it, but it's a very nice modular build for plastic and rubber that's very easy to adjust and also to scale up. So if you missed that, check out the previous episode. What we are going to do in this episode is make sure that all the side products that we are currently producing in this facility, namely heavy oil residue, we are going to make sure we're actually putting that to good use. Now, the obvious thing to do with that is produce fuel, which we are not doing in this facility. And the obvious thing to do with fuel is make sure we are burning that for power. Now, what I actually want to do is we have this very nice looking formation over here with this kind of like bridge across the beach leading into the area next to us. So if we look at the map, we are over here on the left side of the map where this beach is going into this area up here. Now, we haven't actually built anything here, but I do think that once we're kind of done down here, that is where we want to expand. If you did start in the starting area, that's kind of like the default starting area, just like I did, then I think that's a natural place to go next. And because we're going to be passing through this beach quite a few times, what I actually was thinking is we might want to make use of this nice little ridge and build something nice on top of that. There is no reason to do that until we actually have the fuel, because what I actually was thinking is maybe we can have the power generators on top of there. Now, in terms of making sure we have a place to put our fuel factory, I actually don't want to do that on the beach. Because we are going to go with the fuel going all the way up there, I think we can kind of tuck that little fuel making facility in the side corner over here. We have this nice little platform over here. Can I jump on top here, please? Nope, I can't. Not entirely sure why not. But there's a kind of like this platform over here with stones that's kind of looking out to this ridge over here. So that's kind of a natural place to build a fuel facility leading into our power. So let's build a platform to get that going. So I've made a little jump over here because right now we are in the corner that I just pointed out. We have this platform moving up here. I probably want to adjust this a little bit, but for now it will do. And we actually only need a total of 4 refineries to make the fuel. And remember, we had 20 refineries making plastic and rubber, and we're only going to need 4 refineries to make fuel. We actually need less than 4. But because we don't know exactly the ratios that we're going to be using for the plastic and rubber, we might be adjusting that. I'm just going to build the 4, not underutilize them or anything like that. Just keep them like they are right now. Now, the nice thing I like about this setup is because we have 4 and we're only going to be producing fuel here, what we can do is actually put this middle pipe here and kind of interconnect all of these into a single pipe this way, and it just looks really clean and nice. It actually kind of looks like it's being fed into this pipe from 2 sides. Of course, that's not the case because this is the normal belt output, but we're not going to be using that, so we might as well do it like this. Now, of course, this is not the most complicated facility, so I'm just going to kind of put a wall around this, make it look a little bit nicer than it currently does. But then the real challenge is going to be actually building the power stations all the way up on the ridge. So let's finish up and then let's get to that. Okay guys, I think I found my least favorite thing about Satisfactory, and that is dealing with pipes across a long distance. Now, as you can see, I now have the pipes on top of a bus type of system that is very similar to what I actually used in the first few episodes. But I have to admit, I kinda don't like how this looks. I'm not entirely sure what it is that is bugging me about this, because I do think it works decently for belts. But I don't like it. What I also didn't like that was on my first attempt was just putting them on the floor and making it kind of like the easy way just from A to B across the floor. That just looks really messy, similar to belts on the floor. I just can't stand that. There's nothing wrong with it if you do it in your game, of course. I just don't like the looks of it, and my OCD kicks in. So I had to find a different solution, but once again, I don't think I necessarily like this, which leads me to the question. How do you deal with pipes in your game? Let me know in the comments. Do you do something similar as I'm currently doing? Do you just put them on the ground? Maybe you have a way better idea than I've come up with so far. Let me know in the comments. In the meanwhile, I need to find a different solution for this because I, again, just don't like how this looks. There we go, this looks a lot better. And I can almost hear you typing. TDA, this is pretty much the same thing that you just did, just with a different type of stuff below the pipes. Yes, I realized that, but I don't, like I said, I don't know what bothered me about the initial setup, but what I really like about this is that it has a more open feel to it. The pipes just seem more natural, kind of like being in the air. I do know that probably in terms of how the physics would actually work in real life, that you probably don't want to have a pipe across a long distance like I have over here. Something with breaking, bending, stuff like that. But it's a fantasy game. Let's just assume that we have super strong materials that do not care about that it's not a problem. I mean, we're building space elevators after all, so I assume we have pretty good materials. I really like how this looks. Now, I also made sure I actually powered everything up. We now are producing plastic and rubber. As you can see, we're actually piping in the oil residue, so that means we can get on to actually building the, or finishing, I should say, the fuel factory. Now that we have sorted out all the piping, the real challenge starts. Well, I said we sorted out the piping, we sorted out all the easy piping. Because I just realized that in order to get up there, we are going to have to pump the fuel all the way up on that ridge. Now, I have to admit, that might have been a slight error on my side, because I honestly completely forgot about the whole pumping thing. Haven't actually had to do it so far in this game. But I am not one to back away from a challenge, so how hard can it be to pump up some fuel? So, let me get around to that and see how that works. Easy, we're there. Well, actually, no, that was anything but easy. Let me zoom back down and show you the process. There you go. When I say that this took me a while, that is probably the understatement of the century. Not only do you have to build this up like step by step, vertical pipes actually don't work that well. You have to connect the pipe to something whenever you place it down. It can't be too long, of course, which means you kind of need to do it step by step, but you also need to make sure you put down pumps in this entire system. Now, and because you need to put in the pumps, and I actually haven't done that yet, but you need to make sure you have some sort of a ladder to actually place the pumps. But actually, before you start placing any pumps, you should have the pipeline in place. Now, as you can see, I built like towers, and then I built a few sections, then I built another tower, I built a few sections, then I placed a tower on top of the tower. This would have been a lot easier to do when I could actually fly. Now, I know there's mods for that, but I'm trying to play this game vanilla. I also know that I'm pretty close to actually unlocking the flying, but in order to actually fly, we're going to need fuel. So, again, this is just me not kind of being too ambitious when I probably should have kept it a lot simpler. But yeah, anyway, just let me show you how you actually do this in case you want to make a similar structure like this, because I do think it looks kind of neat. I'll actually show you the cleaned up version in a minute. But the way you make a structure like this is that you can place the pipeline supports, you can kind of bend them in a vertical direction, then you can place a pipe in that, and then when you place another pipeline connection on the side of this building, I'm not entirely sure why it's clipping like it's doing now, there we go, and you twist that downwards again. Now, I didn't get my alignment completely correct, this one is kind of out of whack, but you can see if you align these pipe connectors in the correct way, you can actually get a nice vertical looking pipeline across this open foundation type of box. And if you afterwards remove the connectors, you get, and you can see it on the left, you get a very nice straight looking pipe in a vertical direction. But once again, it's kind of annoying to build, so don't do that until you can actually fly, because you don't want to do this. Trust me, it's a lot more work than it's worth. All of the moaning aside about how much work this was, once it's actually done, I do think it looks very, very satisfying. It's a huge pipe. I think it actually goes something like 120 or 130 meters up in the air, which is way more than you should be pumping something upstairs. But anyway, it does look very nice and clean. What also looks very nice and clean is the building behind us. Once again, I kept it quite simple. We have the fuel factory over here. I have the middle pipeline, and I actually left it open on this side. There's no wall, just to not kind of replicate the same type of boxes everywhere. It has the nice little roof with a little bit of closed roofing with a little bit of light coming through. I do have to admit, once again, I really, really like the glass work in this game, just to keep my factories nice and light. I haven't actually used this type of windows at all. Kind of looks really nice. It also really nicely combines with the steel look on the walls. And connecting, as you can see, the power on top of the steel, I think just makes it look very natural, as in a natural factory looking way. One thing that I did find out, that I didn't understand how pumps work. For those of you who are a little bit more experienced than I am, the first thing you will probably notice is this is not how you place pumps. I was like, well, I need to lift things up a couple of 100 meters maybe. Let me just place down some pumps. Each pump gives a head lift of 20 meters, so I'm going to need like 5, 6, 7 pumps. I'll just place all of those in a row and be done with it. But yeah, that's not how that works. So the only thing this is actually doing, this is giving a head lift of 20 meters to this pump. And then this pump is giving a head lift of 20 meters towards this pump. But because we're not actually raising the pipe in between, nothing actually gets pumped up any higher than 20 meters. So what happens in this nice little pipe I have over here, there's some more pumps over here that are completely useless, except for the last one, because this last one will actually pump things up about 20 meters at full speed. It will actually reach a little bit higher than that, for the simple reason that it does lose speed, but it doesn't lose the entire power, so there might actually be some fuel being pumped a little higher, but long story short, it doesn't actually work this way. What you have to do is you have to place a pump at least every 20 meters in order to make sure you keep the maximum throughput all the way up until the top platform. Now that means that I'm going to have to once again kind of disassemble my tower, place a pump every 20 meters, and yeah, remove all the pumps I have down here. Now there's one thing to note about placing pumps that I actually didn't know until I started doing this. You can actually see this pulse going when you build a pump. This will actually show you not only the direction in which the pump is working, because that's what I initially thought that the only reason for the pulse was, but it will actually show you where you should be connecting your next pump, and it will actually allow you to kind of snap to the place in the pipe where you should be placing your next pump. So let me see if I can show you that. Here you see this little blue ring around the pipe. The pump will actually snap to that, and that will place this pump at exactly 20 meters away from the last pump. So this is like the minimum distance or the maximum distance you should be placing your pumps at in order to make sure you can actually do it all the way up. Now this first pump was very easy to place. Let me get to actually placing all the other pumps up on the higher portions of this pipe. Houston, we have another problem, because now I'm actually on top of this little ridge, and apparently this is like the main breeding zone for some of the local critters. And unlike the friends that we've seen in the previous episode that barely hurt me at all, these guys do hurt me a lot. They also shoot a lot more stuff at me, so I'm gonna have to keep my distance, find a way to take them out so we can actually start building here. Now another awesome thing to note about being on top of this platform, the only reason I actually went up here was because I wanted to build here. There's actually a bauxite node here as well. which doesn't actually show up on the radar so far, but that's probably because we haven't actually unlocked it yet. So that's something we need to take into account because we don't want to ruin this node. So the fact that we can actually start building up here already just makes it easier to get to the backside later. And there's actually a crash pod over here as well, which I think has a little friend attached to it as well. The only problem with this pod is that it actually needs something that I can't make yet. It needs a heatsink. So probably going to have to unlock that somewhere in the tech tree or in one of the next milestones. But when we do, we can at least easily reach this now as well. Now, I normally like to think myself a pretty good planner, but I made one huge mistake in planning this episode, and that is I actually didn't yet unlock the power structure. So we don't actually have access to the fuel generator. As you can see, I do now have all the resources to unlock it, but part of those resources were 100 computers, which I just had to manually make because we were not producing computers at all so far. At all, anywhere. We also needed some rubber, which luckily we were already producing from my previous build. But guys, make sure before you start building you have everything unlocked. But yeah, as I just spent like 45 minutes making manual computers. Anyway, back to the build. Okay, and with the fuel generators unlocked, I was able to complete my pipeline from where we have lifted it up to the platform to a nice array of fuel generators, as you can see over here. Now, we do have to deal with some height differences in terms of how this ridge actually looks. It looks kind of flat from the ground floor, but it's not actually when you're on top here. I was able to leave open the outside node as well, so we shouldn't have any issues tapping into that later. And then it just is a matter of putting in the fuel into the fuel generators. Now, I actually found out, another lesson learned there, that overclocking a fuel generator doesn't actually work like I thought it would. So, normally when you overclock something to 250%, it produces 250% more than it did before. For some reason, I actually don't know what the reasoning behind this is, but for some reason with power plants this doesn't actually work. So what I was thinking was, rather than building a huge array of fuel plants, I would just overclock about 4 of them and then be able to consume all the fuel I was producing. However, as you can see, I have this overclocked to 250%, but it's only using a little bit more than 24 fuel per minute. That's actually only twice as much as normal. So rather than actually 250%, it's only 200%. The problem with that is that it is actually only producing 2 times as much. So if I scale this down to 100%, let's round it to exactly 100, you can see we are now producing 150, where we were producing a little bit more than 300 before, and consuming 12 per minute. Why the developers decided that the scaling of a power facility works slightly different from scaling everything else, again, I don't know, but it's good to take it into account when you're planning your own builds. Now, even though we now have this awesome looking, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit, awesome looking power facility all the way up there on the ridge, we are not quite done just yet, because what we still have to do is make sure we also have some fuel for ourselves. Now, we currently have this sink over here. That's just a temporary sink because I don't actually have everything connected to my storage just yet, just to make sure we get some extra tickets from this. But I do want to have a tiny little packaging facility over here that's going to be making like packaged fuel for my personal usage, because we are about to unlock the hovering thing. I'm not entirely sure, the hover pack, the jet pack, I'm not entirely sure how it's called, but that will allow us to fly. But I'm assuming we're going to have to fuel it with actual fuel, so let's make sure we are producing some of that. Now, the convenient thing is that in order to make fuel, or I should say the inconvenient thing about that, is that we are going to have to make some empty canisters, because we have to actually put the fuel into something. Convenient thing about canisters is that we can actually make them from plastic. We happen to have a plastic factory right over here. So what we can actually do is simply place down a constructor, maybe something like this. I might have to move it, let's see how that turns out. And then have a packager, which is actually a kind of neat looking tiny building. Have a packager right next to that. And basically we'll have the plastic going in here. We have the canisters coming out here on the back end. We can feed those straight into the packager. We have a open pipeline over here where we can feed in the actual fuel, and then we will have the packaged fuel coming out on this side, right next to the place where we also have the remaining plastic and rubber coming out. So we have an easy time fitting all of that into our bus. And no, the bus is actually not here just yet, so that's not a project we're going to have to deal with after that. But let's do first things first. Now, of course, I don't want to have these two buildings just standing out here on their own, so we're going to have to make that look a little prettier than this. As always, make sure that before you start putting down walls and making everything look pretty, connecting everything up to the power, etc., you have your building functional. So what I've done here is I actually connected the plastic to the constructor. I made sure I put down some walls to make sure it was actually aligned properly, of course. And I also made sure I connected it up to the fuel. Now, I really like how this actually turned out. This wasn't, well, it was intentional, but I didn't actually expect it to look this good. The whole piping system that I have going here, you can actually place pipes on top of pipes. And this double piping over here looks so good. Yeah, of course, it's completely subjective, but I do think this is actually a pretty decent way to connect up all your pipes. Another really nice thing I like about this build that was not entirely accidental is that because we have this central pipeline, it was actually really easy to connect onto the other side of the pipe in order to make sure we are exporting the fuel to our facility over there. So this is the main pipeline going all the way up to our fuel facility, but we have a secondary pipe connected right into the same piping system that goes the other direction into our fuel. Now, we do need a valve in order to make sure we're not overproducing fuel. So right now I have a valve over here that will limit the outflow of fuel to the packaging facility to 10 per minute, just to make sure that we're not making much more fuel than we need. We could actually divide that a little bit differently. We actually do have a small surplus of fuel because we don't actually need all that energy just right now. But 10 per minute should be way more, but at least sufficient for what we need now. I'm only going to have to use the fuel to unlock a few things. Probably need some fuel to fly around as well. I actually don't know if we're going to use a lot more fuel than we're currently producing. Probably at some point, but for now, I think this will do. Now, last things are going to be making sure this actually looks like a building, because right now it's functional, but it doesn't really look any good. So let me see what I can do with that. And there we go. Now once again I went for the kind of concrete with steel and some glass type of building. It looks really cute standing next to the larger brother over there that's producing all the plastic and rubber. But it looks kind of natural. It's like kind of like a side building on campus or something like that. I actually really like how the sink looks in there as well. It's going to be removed pretty soon, because of course we don't want to be sinking all of this plastic and rubber, but we want to actually be using it somewhere else. But for now it will do, and it looks very nice and tidy. I actually really like the fact that we have the power up there as well. It probably looks a lot better in the dark, to be honest, but whenever we get close to the next zone, we'll be moving under that. We'll see all that power up there. It just makes the world seem a little bit more civilized. I was going to say alive, but there's plenty of stuff alive in this world that has nothing to do with us, but it just makes it more visible that we have been here. That's kind of what I was going for. Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a little bit of a long one and a little bit of different types of things. We made a fuel factory, we made a whole piping system going up, we put some power, we put some packaging. But But all in all, I do think it kind of all belongs together and it ties into the previous episode. In the next episode, what we're going to be doing is we are going to have to really work on kind of combining a couple of things that we've done. We have the central storage, but we haven't actually connected a lot of the more distant buildings up to the central storage, so we'll need to work on our bus. And as you might have noticed in this episode, it was really noticeable that we haven't actually automated several items that we have unlocked. So we haven't automated computers, we haven't automated circuit boards, we haven't automated motors even, and we definitely also did not automate anything of the next phase items other than the frameworks that we already used for the previous phase. So we have a lot of homework to do, and I think rather than making another large build of items like we've done here where we're producing huge amounts of plastic and rubber, we are now actually in a good position to kind of make a single build that is going to solve a lot of our current problems. And obviously there will be new problems after that, but make sure you join me in the next episode for that. If you're still here, you are awesome. Make sure you like and subscribe, it really helps me out, and I will catch you in the next one.